Hey friends, welcome back to Canadian Cutting Edge, and yes, I'm back inside again today, but we're talking about an outdoor knife. This is the Mora Companion Spark. Now, about 6 years ago, I did a video about a knife that is very, very much like this, an obsolete Mora, the Mora Light My Fire. I got it from the local Canadian Tire store. It's an obsolete, out of production knife, but it's almost identical to this with just a small change near the tip of the blade, kind of like what they did with the GERMAN, but not exactly the same, where they added a little extra bevel near the tip. Other than that, it's basically the same knife. This thing comes in 5 main colors, and there's exclusive colors and runs of different colors. There's loads of colors out here, but 5 main colors that this thing comes in. Now, it's a Swedish knife, Mora, and Swedish steel, 12C27 by, well, I'll still call it Sandvik. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's a typical Mora sheath, but the knife has got a Ferrocerium rod in with the handle. That's both its biggest pro and its biggest con if you want something different than just a normal fixed blade knife. Now, this is not an expensive knife. I'll briefly go over the prices right now. Let me look at my sheet here. White Mountain Knives has got them starting at $29.99, going up to $33.99, but you save 10% with coupon code CCE when you shop at whitemountainKnives.com. And then it's $26.99 up to $30.59, which is around 37 Canadian right now to 42 Canadian, which is less money, my fellow Canadians, than you're going to find it anywhere in Canada, at least anywhere that I could find, by about $13 Canadian. And if you're buying this in Canada online, you're going to have to pay for shipping anyways, you're going to have to pay for taxes anyways, and those things are not just a wash. It's generally, those parts are generally cheaper by buying it from the United States because you don't have to pay the tax, you just have to pay some shipping. And White Mountain Knives does not charge an awful lot. And a knife like this, it's 100% legal in Canada. Nothing wrong with this knife at all. There's no legal issues with buying one of these from outside of the country. Other places you can get it, in Canada, it's around $50 and up. At just about every store, loads of stores in Canada that have it, 50 Canadian dollars and up. In the UK, I found a store called springfields.co.uk that's got it for 25.99 pounds, so 26 British pounds. Australia, the cheapest place I found was 56 Australian dollars at granbergs.com.au, and the next closest was ziptac.com.au for 63 Australian dollars. A lot of other places were close to 100 Australian dollars for this, which, hey, in Australia, you're used to paying way more. Well, might not be used to it. It's common for you guys to pay a lot more for the knives that you get. It's unfortunate. That's enough about how much the thing costs. Come on down to the tabletop. Let's take a closer look at this. Just one last disclaimer. No, this video will not contain any outdoor footage or indoor footage of me cutting stuff up with this. I've got a video that I made a couple of years ago that covers some of the reasons, most of the reasons why I don't show cutting on my videos. And if you want to see how a Mora cuts, there's loads of Mora videos out there demonstrating how they cut. I can't really contribute anything to that, positive or negative. It's a decent blade shape with a decent grind. So now let's get to the tabletop. I hope you stick with me to the end. Okay, filling up the screen right here, it's the blue version. If I wasn't clear in the intro, I did get mine from White Mountain Knives. I do get a reviewer's discount from them. I don't get anything for free, but I got a reviewer's discount on this knife. Now, first off, it's clearly a Mora knife. There it says Morakniv, 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 and Mora. Lots of badging on their knives. They're proud of their knives. Stamped in the steel on the blade, of course, Morakniv, made in Sweden, stainless. There might be some special versions that are carbon steel. I think they're all stainless steel for the companion spark. Of course, the companion spark being the ferrocerium rod, the spark part being that. But let's start off with talking more about the sheath. It's the standard Mora sheath. If you've not seen one before, well, I'll try to cover it quickly. This is a polymer. I don't think there's any fiber reinforcement in there. It's basically a polymer. There's a drain hole at the bottom right there. There's a push-off point right there when you go to release the knife. There's a belt loop, and it's got a bit of a bottom to it so that it won't easily, go up or down. It stays within your belt. And there's a hook system. Some Moras have a way that you can, daisy chain 2 or 3, maybe more, however many you want, daisy chain them to each other. But this one doesn't daisy chain to anything. It's just the way it's designed. It doesn't have any way to daisy chain. No button. But it's decent. It's got a little bit of flexibility to it. Let's put it in there. It only goes one way. This is right hand only. There are Mora sheaths out there and other companies, third parties that make like leather sheaths and stuff for these knives. You'll have to hunt those down yourself. I'm not going to provide that here. But it comes with this TPE black part here. So you grab that with some of your fingers and you push off with your thumb and it comes loose and you can take it out. A little bit of rattle. Let me see. That's mostly the string, but there's, it can move a tiny bit, not much at all. It's not like it's noisy at all. So it's a decent sheath. Now let's take care of talking about the knife. We've got a straight spine and then a bit of a clip right here. We've got a Scandi grind, which is a flat grind that comes from, there's the full flatness of the blade over most of the knife, and then there's just a short bevel coming down almost to the very edge. There is a super tiny little micro bevel on here, and I couldn't measure the angle of that, but I did get the angle of, the main Scandi bevel, and I'll tell you that a little bit later. And of course, this is stainless steel Sandvik 12C27. The tang comes in along here. It is the kind of tang that Mora's been doing for a long time, and they work and they hold up. Is it the perfect tang? Of course not. This knife, for its price point, has a decent sturdy tang in there. Is it indestructible? No, nothing is indestructible. Okay. The handle, it's got this core, which is the same kind of poly as the sheath is made out of. And then they got this layer of TPE, which is a thermoplastic elastomer that is put over here. And it's a bit soft. You can take your thumbnail, push it in there, and it'll slowly come back to normal. You can, scratch it and stuff, just like you can scratch polymer, but it scratches a little bit easier. It leaves marks a little bit more easily, but it offers you grip. And if you're using this in the cold, it doesn't feel quite as cold as just the polymer does. And then, it warms up fairly easily in your hand. But I in the wintertime, I'd use these with a glove, that's for sure. Maybe even in the summertime. But that's that part of the handle. Typical, you got a bit of a guard here. Your index finger sits there. Your thumb has got sort of a little bit of a rest area right here. It swells in the middle and it swells this way as well. It's just a good size for most people, even for youths. Anything from pubescent boys and girls and up, it's a decent size handle. And this thing. The pros and the cons of this thing. The pro of this is the ferrocerium was quite good. I don't remember if I demonstrated throwing sparks in that video 6 years ago. I'm going to demonstrate it here on this one. You can see I've not done it with this one yet, but I will. This knife is probably going to be sold, who knows. But let's see if I can start a fire. No, I'm not going to start a fire in here. I'm just going to, the first couple strokes is probably just going to take the coating off, so let's see. Yeah, I made the light vibrate. There's a spark already. So clearly just the third time striking across it, not even long hard strikes. Some people like to, do multiple little scrapes and scrape a pile of this stuff first and do that. I'm not going to tell you how to start a fire. That's not what this video is about. Just clearly this ferrocerium that's in here is a decent quality. Now, what we have in the handle is, a mechanism for it to grab onto this edge right here into that slot right there. So you move it in, you turn it on, turning it counterclockwise, and it catches. You've got a bit of a lanyard that comes with it, and you know, it's not tight in there. You can see there's a little bit of movement before it starts resisting, and that's because that little lip that's on there, you know, starts catching on to the inside and it resists. But it's decent. Now, the con about this is, I wish they would have given us just a little more cordage and given us a way that we could tie that cordage somewhere on this knife. You can't tie it through that hole. That hole is being used by this piece of plastic right here. So you could possibly, you know, enlarge this hole through here, this front one, and, you know, put some cordage through there and tie it around and still make it work. But most of that hole, as you can see here, is taken up by the ferrocerium rod. So you'd have to do that, and plus, you know, it would lose the balance. But if you did tie it on there, let's just demonstrate. If it was tied on there, you still have enough, you know, room to strike the ferrocerium rod. I just wish they would have made something somewhere, a hole somewhere that this, you know, came standard tied onto, so that you don't lose this, because a lot of people lose this part. They misplace it, especially if they just get the all black version. Because what do you do when you light a fire? You know, you whichever hand you're going to do it in, you strike your spark and stuff, and immediately you want to tend to the fire. So you put the knife down, you put this down, and you tend to the fire. And then once your fire's going, oh, I need my knife, and you pick it up, and you might not pick this part up. You might. You probably will 9 times out of 10, but that 10th time, you might just lose it. So there's that. A little bit of residue on there. See, it wipes off pretty easy. That's where I was striking it from. Cleans up okay. It's decent. And that's the main overview of the knife. Before we go over the sizes and dimensions on this thing, I want to cover who is this knife for. This is, you know, a bushcraft style knife, but I'm not trying to suggest that this should be your main bushcrafting knife. No, that's not what I'm trying to say in this video. This is a good knife for people that go camping on occasion, or, you know, just go out in the woods, you know, once a year, twice a year maybe, and not very often. And you're just going for a day hike or something, and you want something a little bit with you in case you need to make a fire. This is not a proper survival knife, at least not in my opinion. Can it be used in a survival situation? Definitely. Is it better than having, you know, just a knife with no ferrocerium rod? Definitely. Or no other way to start a fire? You know, 100%. But this is not really a survival kind of package. This is a good package to goof around with, to play with, to learn with, to use on the rare occasion. Maybe you're going car camping or something, and you might forget your lighter or whatever. You know, just all kinds of reasons that you might want to have this. The other main audience for this, I think it's a really great knife to give to, you know, a young person. Like I said in the intro, I think I said it in the intro, you know, somebody that's in scouts, you know, this is a cool knife. It's a nice fixed blade. It has a safe sheath. You know, you get something with some color, make it easy for them to find it if they misplace it or whatever. Reasonable grip, you know, fair strength, even with the tang, and, you know, they can make their fire with it if they want to. So that's sort of 2 main categories. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other uses and purposes for this knife, but that's the main 2 things that I see for this. And now let's show you all the dimensions that I've measured right here in my own. Let's begin with the weight. The weight of the sheath is 34 grams. Oh, I don't have on my sheet the imperial measured ounces. Ounces are on the screen. The knife with the cordage and the ferrocerium rod together is 93 grams, and altogether this thing is 127 grams. Not much weight at all. Let's go on to some other things. The sharpness from the factory got a score of 165 best, which is quite good indeed. The best thing about Mora knives, in my opinion, is almost all of them, maybe all of them, are machine sharpened. I don't know if the micro bevel is machine sharpened, but this main bevel in here is machine sharpened, which means they always have very much the same angle. And, you know, I believe probably they do the edge bevel as well by machine. It only makes sense that they would. And that means you get a sharp knife every single time. With other production knives, like the pocket knives that I review, you know how I find that there's a wonky angle along most of them. Often several degrees, not uncommon for there to be 4 or 5, 7, 8 degrees of change along the length of the knife. Not on these. These are the same. Everyone's the same because they get clamped in a machine and ground in a machine to the same angle every single time. There is some variability, and I'll cover that in just a minute. But let's first talk about the cutting edge length. So from, you know, the heel of the blade right here, straight line to the tip, that distance is 103.9 millimeters, 4.09 inches. From the tip to the closest spot of the plastic, the polymer up here on the spine is a bit less, 99.1 millimeters, which is 3.9 inches. How thick is the blade steel? 2.44 millimeters, 0.096 of an inch, so just a hair under 1/10 of an inch. The blade depth this way, it's biggest right here. It starts, you know, becoming smaller this way, from the spine to the cutting edge, you know, right away. And then, of course, quite a bit more right at that clip. So the widest point's right here, 20.5 millimeters, 0.81 of an inch. How thick is it behind the grind? Well, I've got no way of measuring something so super fine. If you want to know the number just behind the micro bevel, well, it's a super tiny number. If you want to know the number here, well, that's the thickness of the blade, and I already covered that. The main bevel on these, you know, the part, you can see the lines milled this way. The main bevel on this is very close to 12 degrees per side. Now, I measured both sides twice, and I measured them clamped in the system both ways. And yeah, it's a few decimal points of a degree off one side to the other, which makes sense because they're using grinding wheels, and grinding wheels don't necessarily grind evenly. Well, they might be using belts. I doubt it. They're probably using grinding wheels. And, you know, so it's not exactly 12 degrees per side. It's very close to 12 degrees per side, but it's consistent all the way along. Now the handle length measured this way, 123.2 millimeters, 4.85 inches. The thickness of the handle is thickest right about in the middle, and that is 20.5 millimeters, 0.81 of an inch. The handle depth this way is biggest right in the middle where my index fingers are, 30.9 millimeters, 1.22 inches. The grip area, well, it depends on where you measure it. You know, you've got a rounded edge here and a rounded edge here. It's just over, you know, 100 millimeters, 10 centimeters, just the tiniest hair over 4 inches. So basically 4 inches, 10 centimeters for the grip, which is quite good. And the total length of this knife is right around 223 millimeters, which is 8.78 inches. So 8 3/4 inches plus a tiny bit. It's a pretty standard size. Thank you very much to my supporters, those of you who send money through Patreon or YouTube memberships, patreon.com/CCE, or click the join button down below the video and you can help me out. If you just want to help me out one time, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/cutting edge. I think it's cutting edge because I couldn't do Canadian cutting edge. It wouldn't let me do something that long. There you go. It's a decent knife at a decent price point, decent quality for a lot of good uses. It's just not, don't let anybody tell you this is, you know, a good main choice for a survival knife. It really isn't, but it is a good knife, especially at the price point. So thanks for watching. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.